The Intercept has a pretty interesting piece here about how House Democratic leadership effectively killed the stock trading ban on purpose. So let me walk you through this. The title is House Democratic Leadership Designed Stock Trade Ban to Fail, negotiators say. Nancy Pelosi is a controversial figure, but one thing her supporters and detractors agree on is her tactical skill as a legislator and power broker. Somehow those legendary skills failed her this week. So here is the argument that they make. Democratic leadership in the House of Representatives tanked an opportunity to pass a key ethics reform Thursday, according to several Democratic and Republican staffers involved in bipartisan efforts to ban stock trading by members of Congress. Those staffers say leadership's move appears crafted to head off broad bipartisan support for reform. After House leaders introduced a bill to curtail stock trading by federal officials on Tuesday, Democrats and Republicans pointed out the discrepancies between the leadership-approved version and the carefully negotiated bipartisan bills that predated it. Those discrepancies led to several members saying they could not vote on the measure without reviewing the text and determining whether the bill could draw enough votes in both chambers to become law. When backlash to the leadership version of the bill emerged, leaders pulled it from the schedule. The decision to punt further action until after the midterm elections imperils the odds that any version of the ban will pass the House and Senate. Several sources close to bipartisan negotiations on the subject tell The Intercept that may have been the point. On Friday, Representative Abigail Spanberger called it a kitchen sink package that they knew would immediately crash upon arrival. The non-starters in the leadership's legislation, according to one Democratic staffer, included issues around the structure of qualified blind trusts, the inclusion of dependent children in the ban, and a measure expanding the ethics rules to members of the judiciary, sticking points that negotiators addressed in bipartisan reforms hashed out earlier this year. Quote, the qualified blind trusts are kind of fake and are not an appropriate safeguard to really ensure that we have, real divestiture from conflicting interests, the staffer who is not authorized to speak publicly on the matter said. Okay, so basically what they're arguing is, hey, we had negotiations that were ongoing. We had a number of bills that basically made it so that we were going to ban people in Congress from trading stocks. And Democratic leadership gets involved and they go, okay, well, we're gonna pick up the ball and run with it here. We're gonna do our own version. And in their version, they put a bunch of things that in the previous round of negotiations, they already ruled out a lot of these provisions. So one thing was, this is a total workaround. The whole thing about a blind trust, sort of a bullshit giant loophole. So they put that in there. Which makes it a weaker piece of legislation, but then in other ways, they also made it a stronger piece of legislation, like banning the dependent children from betting in the marketplace, and also the judiciary, so judges, banning them. So I definitely support banning judges. I definitely support banning the dependent children. I don't support this blind trust loophole that they put in there. But either way, the whole point, they say, of putting these provisions in was a poison pill, which made it so that they knew it was going to blow up and they couldn't get the support, and they did that on purpose. This is what they're saying. Several Democratic and Republican staffers involved in earlier bipartisan efforts say House leadership made no effort to consult them on what sort of framework might pass. In particular, the process ignored a version of the legislation co-authored by Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal and Representative Matt Rosendale. That measure also has bipartisan support in the Senate, where Senators Elizabeth Warren and Steve Daines have introduced a corresponding bill. Rosendale's chief of staff, Trevor Whetstone, told The Intercept his office has long believed that package has the votes to pass both chambers. Interesting. So a different version of the bill they think can pass, but guess who's not bringing it up for a vote? It wasn't a real process, one Democratic staffer told The Intercept. There were all these things thrown in here that on the surface look good, but make it so expansive that, it's not going to make it to the president's desk. All right, let me pause here. See, I don't know how to feel about this particular comment, because the provisions that make it tougher are good. It's the provisions that weaken it that make it worse, right? But they're saying, oh, the problem was you put the tougher provisions in, which other people won't vote for, but also they're saying, like, well, of course you knew that wasn't going to pass. Well, Yeah, but that should pass, right? Like, it should pass. Banning the judiciary should pass. Banning the dependent children from betting in the marketplace, that should pass too. So on that front, I'm actually with Democratic leadership that, like, it would have been better with those two provisions in. But again, ultimately, it's a moot point anyway, because they knew it wouldn't pass with that in there, which is why they put it in there. So they wanted to kill any and all attempt to ban politicians from trading stocks. Those sources claim that leadership's introduction and quick scuttling of legislative text on the issue makes sense only if viewed as a calculated play to kill efforts at reform. Quote, several of the key issues that were worked out and some of the bipartisan efforts just weren't addressed, a Republican staffer told The Intercept. There's a lot of overwhelming consensus here, a lot of work that's been done to achieve that. You don't completely ignore all of that on accident. So, I mean, the interesting thing is, and they go on to describe this in the article too, even other Democratic politicians are like, we know what you just did here, Nancy. Like, we see what you did. We know you did this on purpose. And so, in other words, Nancy, it wasn't even like Pelosi did this trick and told all the other politicians, like, hey, you're in on this trick with me, right? We're going to kill this by getting crafty. No. What she did was killed it on purpose, and then even trying to fool even the other Democratic congresspeople who some of them genuinely want this to pass. So look, now why is this going on? We all know why this is going on, because Nancy Pelosi herself makes a tremendous amount of money from all of these, what should be illegal trades, right? And all of Paul Pelosi, her husband, making all these financial moves based on the insider information that she gives him. And we all know that's going on. They've made a tremendous amount of money from this ever since Nancy became Speaker of the House, and ever since she's had all this insider information. It's an open secret that this is what these people do. We covered the story the other day. 3,700 sketchy trades over the past 2 or 3 years. There was a detailed reporting on that front. So, we know what's going on here. We're not idiots. And they're trying to kill it because they don't want to pass it. The idea is going to be resurrected is absolute nonsense. Now, I will say, there are other things on the docket that they want to pass, and the other things are good. I'm trying to find where they were. The fate of any potential reform now rests on the volatile politics of what appears to be an increasingly packed lame duck session. The session is set to be dominated by negotiations over the annual budget and the National Defense Authorization Act, two sprawling and time-consuming packages that are considered must-pass. In addition, other higher priority pieces of legislation, like the Electoral Count Act and the Respect for Marriage Act, may sap away what little legislating energy remains. Okay, so in other words, they want to do the Electoral Count Act to prevent another January 6th. I get that. And they want to do the Respect for Marriage Act, which is gay marriage. I get that too. So those things are good, but of course, they're getting rid of this particular legislation to ban trading stocks because they all want to keep trading stocks. They all want to do it. They want to make money. They want to cheat the system. They want to do this insider trading. And right now, all we have is disclosure rules. Like, hey, you have to show us the corrupt trades you make. But there's been a lot of grassroots, genuine support to change that. And it seems like they're taking all that energy and throwing it out the window on purpose, solely for selfish reasons. And we all see through it, man. You're not fooling anybody on this front. And it's disgusting, and it really shows you why, look, you can't just rely on these fuckers. Because at the end of the day, they'll always protect their own ass. This is why I think Mike Gravel had a phenomenal idea when he said we need another branch of government that's the people's branch of government where they get to vote directly on stuff and they can provide more checks and balances on the other branches of government. So have a direct democracy branch, basically. When you hear something like that, you go, well, if that was the case, we'd already have all these phenomenal policies in place. There's no doubt about it. I mean, what does this poll at? 80%, 90%? Something like that. So Nancy strikes at the last minute yet again. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.